What is it that's been making things interesting in Malawi in the last year that make people look at Malawi right now? Either of you can.
Yeah, Jimmy, you want to take that one, and then I'll hop in here and there.
Okay, that's fine. Thanks, Sean. I think Malawi has had maybe the most interesting 24 months, perhaps. We had what we may call regular elections in 2019. We vote every 5 years in Malawi, voting for president, members of parliament, and from 2014, including also local councillors. So we voted in May. With the usual processes, all the observers in place, everything seemed fine. But then there was a lot of notable irregularities that were happening, and there were a lot of misgivings, especially from the opposition after the announcement of the results. So the Electoral Commission, I think they have 8 days to announce the results after the polling stations have been closed. So following the announcement, the opposition parties, two main opposition parties went to court to complain about irregularities, and a constitutional court was set. Malawi doesn't really have constitutional court, so this was set up specifically for this case, so it was sitting at high court level. It took about 8-9 months of deliberations and a lot of protests in between that civil society organizations and ordinary Malawians really that were not happy with the process had been protesting, demanding that the chairperson of the electoral body, Janasa, stand down for her part in the political, what we may call political mess. She insisted she was not standing down until the court ruling. So most of the demonstrations was about that at the time when the court proceedings were also taking place. So on 3rd February 2020, after about 9 months, I think, the court ruled that indeed there were irregularities with the elections. The irregularities basically could have contributed to the outcome of this or the elections. So the key issues, the elections were annulled, and we were given 50 days. So the electoral board were given 50 days, 150 days rather, to organize new elections. At which point the electoral body and then the ruling party, the DBP under Peter Mutharika's leadership, decided that they were going to appeal. That appeal came as a surprise to many, especially the involvement of Malawi Electoral Commission, because it really had no case. I mean, this had nothing to do with interests of Malawians. But that's what happens. Mutharika himself called the ruling a travesty of justice. Nonetheless, the Electoral Commission chair, Janasa, never stood down, said because they were appealing, so they wait for the outcome of the appeal. So there had been a lot of antecedents. We were waiting for new elections, and then you still have the same electoral body that messed up in place. So after the ruling at the Supreme Court, which upheld the Constitutional Court ruling, Janasa went, and then ironically, the person responsible for appointing the new chairperson, as well as members, the court commissioners of the Electoral Commission, was the president, who was also an interested party because he was a candidate in the coming elections. So the appointments were done. I think at that point, almost every Malawian just wanted to move on and vote. You must also have this in mind that in between those elections, in between the arguments in court, the protests, what also happened is that in the midst of it, we had the pandemic now. Some other countries have cancelled elections. There were a lot of restrictions that had to come in, but in Malawi, we had to make serious choices, because after the ruling of 3rd March, in which the elections were not, the president, the then sitting president Mutharika, had lost legitimacy. He wasn't the right person basically to deal with COVID-19. So the choice was, do you then go on and vote and have a new president that maybe may have legitimacy and perhaps a bit more leeway to make decisions about COVID-19? Or do you postpone the election until COVID-19 is over, then you can vote? In which case, the chances are the sitting president may not have the powers to make decisions. And I think this is what happened. Now, the most interesting thing, I think, internationally for the second elections is that we did not have this time around international electoral observers. These were allowed in 2019. They gave the whole vote, basically, the Green Bill, including SADC, including Commonwealth, EU, all of them said the elections, the usual script, they were free and fair. And they went. The courts disagreed, just as many Malawians who went on the street and protested disagreed. This time around, it would have been interesting if we didn't have COVID-19, if these guys were coming back. But it was easier for them to say, we're not coming this time around because there are no flights and so on and so forth. But almost every Malawian was a monitor this time around. A lot of people actually volunteered, using their own resources, making sure that the elections this time around were going to be, if not free and fair, at least much better from previous time. It was funny when the flight carrying the ballots, I think the ballots were printed in Qatar, was coming to Malawi. That day, actually, there's almost a minute-by-minute update on Facebook and Twitter about whereabouts of the flights. Until the flight landed, it didn't be longer. So the monitoring actually started in Qatar. So it was that sort of moment whereby everybody, I think almost every Malawian, decided, you know what, if we went to sort out this country, we can only do it ourselves, and we need to be serious about these elections. Because if these elections were also messed up and we were in a deep mess, basically. So this is the environment in which we managed to do this. I think what's most interesting also is because I think nobody gave us a chance, including our fellow Africans. Nobody gave us a chance. And I think that's what has made it even more interesting. Locally, I think this has been maybe good for Malawi that because the ruling of the Supreme Court ruling, one of the key issues also that came out of that was the reinterpretation of what it means by majority. So since return to democracy in 1994 in Malawi, we meant to understood that by majority we mean first past the post. So we've had presidents like Mutharika in 2014 only had 35% of the vote, but it was declared winner on the basis that the second candidate had 27%, I think. So this time around, the court said no. Majority means the person who wins has to get at least over 50% of the vote. So it meant that also the ruling said only candidates who had competed in the 2019 elections were eligible for 2020 fresh elections. So it meant that the three top candidates, if you may put it that way, none of them was going to get the 50%. So any coalition between, say, the second and the third candidate, which is what happened in this case, had a better chance of winning. And exactly that's what happened. So for the first time in Malawi, we have what we may call a ruling coalition, because basically it's a coalition of political parties. About 9 of them, including just Bandas, but most of them are really junior parties. The main ones are Malawi Congress Party, MCP, Lazarus Chakwera, and then Salos Chilima's UTM. So it's almost like Chilima and Chakwera in charge together, almost in equal terms, because everybody feels they have contributed to the outcome of the elections. Unlike before, when in Malawi, almost every president has fallen out of the vice president, basically because the vice presidents have just been handpicked, almost like, okay, I like you, you can be my vice president, and therefore you have to listen to what I'm saying. But this time around, I think there's a better bargaining between those two. So maybe we could have a bit more sensible leadership up there than any time before.